Are you ready to challenge your expectations? Then stay tuned. Hey friend, welcome back to another Mind Right Monday. I'm your host, Bonnie Kelly, your emotional intelligence speaker, author, and coach, here to help you get out of your way and on with your life. Today, we are talking about expectations, and we're going to talk about how these are connected to your emotional intelligence and 3 ways you can begin to challenge your expectations. So, before we dive into the 3 tips, tools, and ideas to help you today, let's talk about expectations. There's an old saying that says, expectation is the root to all heartache. And honestly, I believe it. It's our unchallenged, unspoken expectations that others place upon us and that we place upon ourselves that really can discourage and hurt not only us, but it can hurt the people around us as well. And so it's so important for us to begin to learn to challenge those expectations, to begin to challenge how they show up and how they're influencing how we feel. Now, why I connect this to emotional intelligence is because it takes a high level of emotional intelligence to challenge expectations in the first place. Now, if you're new to that word, emotional intelligence is really your ability to know what you feel, why you feel it, and how your feelings are not only affecting you, but those around you. Emotional intelligence is one of the most powerful skills that you can invest in to become less reactive, to be more emotionally engaged, and to be more emotionally present, to not allow your emotions to control you. And the reason why I say that to challenge expectations takes a high level of emotional intelligence is because our expectations typically cause heartache, pain, disappointment, and discouragement. And we have to be able to separate that from ourselves, and that requires the emotional intelligence skill. All right, so let's dive into my first tips on how you can challenge your expectations, which is examine your expectations. All right, so the very first tip that we need to do into challenging our expectations is to examine our expectations. What I mean by this is that you have to really know where you're lobbying expectations consciously and unconsciously. Because believe it or not, all of us have expectations that we're putting out there on every single interaction. And even more so, they all have expectations that they're putting out on every single one of us. This is one of the most dangerous things that is going to create disappointment and discouragement in relationships. But it happens in every one of us, in every one of our relationships. So it's so important for us to begin to examine, where do you have expectations that are spoken and unspoken? Where are they being met and where are they not being met? And what expectations are placed upon you, spoken and unspoken, that are being met and not being met as well? Once we really have this clear picture, now we can decide whether or not those expectations are fair, reasonable, or realistic. Because a lot of times we expect things of our partners, of our parents, of our siblings, of our children that isn't conducive to who they are or what they're capable of. This is what fuels disappointment. And we want to begin to examine them and to challenge them. Because I can say that it's natural for us to have expectations that a mother should be nurturing and loving and supportive and caring. Well, what happens when your mother doesn't know how to do these things? She was never taught them, and so she has a hard time with being vulnerable, and so she's distant and maybe a little bit sharp or cold. Well, because we have that unspoken expectation that we're not even aware that's there, your mother will constantly disappoint you. You're going to constantly feel sad and hurt by her and her behavior because it doesn't match your ideal image of what she should be like. Now, I say should be like because that's where you know you have an expectation. Is as soon as you start lobbying shoulds around, you know that there's an unspoken expectation nearby. Let me end this section off by a quote with Tracy, who said, "Positive expectations are the mark of a superior personality." Again, expectations are something that you get to consciously create. But most of us are running around with default expectations that aren't fair and are continuing to lead you down to disappointment. It's time to challenge that. All right, so this leads me to my second tip, which is get real with what you actually can expect from those around you. All right, so this is a huge, huge one that I kind of led into on the last tip. But it's so important to recognize that once you realize and examine what expectations, spoken and unspoken, you have with your mother and your father and your husband and your sister and your brother, well, now it's time for us to really ask, like, is this person capable of meeting my expectations? And in many cases, the answer is going to be no. In many cases, that we expect the people that are in these roles to be someone that they're not capable of being. It doesn't mean that they're bad or they're broken. They just might love you in different ways. Or they just might not be capable of being vulnerable or to be seen or to speak up, or they don't know how to behave any other way other than being passive aggressive or short or controlling. This is their behavioral problems. However, when we have an expectation that they should be different or that they need to be different, we're the ones that are constantly disappointed. So we need to not only examine those, we want to start to eliminate those expectations, to begin to see people for who they are and what they are capable of, and to get real. Get really honest with it. And be okay with that's just where they're at and what they're capable of. And when you could be honest about that, now you can change the way you relate and interact with them based on reality and not on expectations. Okay, so this leads me to my third and final tip for this week, which is be clear with your expectation. All right, so this is the final step within our expectations. It is probably one of the most powerful, is that once you've examined your expectations and you've kind of got real with what you can expect from people, now it's time to really get clear with not only yourself, but with them as to what it is that you expect from them. As I mentioned earlier on, all of us have unspoken expectations. Unspoken means that these are just assumed expectations that other people should know or should behave a certain way. Well, that's not fair and it's not real. However, if there is a certain expectation that you feel is absolutely necessary and that you're unwilling to negotiate on, well, then that's where you need to clearly, positively, and lovingly communicate that. Now, the emphasis is on positively and lovingly. What I mean by that is you need to remove your judgment, you need to remove the frustration and disappointment that they're not these things, and you need to just ask them if they'd be willing to honor you with this expectation. By putting it in a different way, it's going to allow other people to hear it and be more open or receptive to it. Now, I share this knowing that parents, it's a little bit different. You have expectations of your children. We have expectations of our spouses. But again, if they're disappointing you, then there needs to be some room for some clarity. There needs to be some room for negotiation, and there needs to be some room for us to challenge where we might not be are not being very realistic. So you want to shift or alter those a little bit. Now, I'm not saying give up on your kids' straight A's. I'm saying that maybe they can get straight A's except for in advanced science or art or theater, which might not be their thing. So maybe it's just about working with them versus forcing them to work in a way that you would ideally want them to work. So again, take this as just guidelines, not as the hear all, say all. And again, put that through your discerning filters and you decide where you need to challenge your expectations to begin to soften them or to loosen them or to change them altogether. So then that way you can have better relationships moving forward. All right, let me end this section off with a quote by Stephen Covey who said, "Treat a man as he is and he will remain as he is. Treat a man as he can and should be, and he will become as he can and should be." Again, this is where we can then remove the judgment of what somebody isn't, and we can really just be appreciative of who they are, start championing other people's strengths versus pointing out their weaknesses, and you will see people grow and thrive around you. And not only to see yourself having a better relationship with them as well. So hopefully you learned something this week. As always, we love hearing from you. So don't forget to comment on this video or go over to bonniekelly.me and you can where all the cool people hang out and talk about cool stuff around personal development. You can also email me anytime at getinspired@bonniekelly.me if you have a personal question, or maybe you just have a little struggle you need to work through and you want some guidance on. We're here for you every step of the way. Remember to subscribe, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week. Did you enjoy this week's video? I sure hope so, my friend. As always, they're brought to you from viewers like you. So as I mentioned earlier, email me. If you've got a personal development question that you would like to see answered, you can email me at getinspired@bonniekelly.me. And don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. This is how you can stay connected and up to speed on everything personal dev we put out on the Ethernet. Until next time, I'm Bonnie Kelly.